These are the most desired alien species in Star Wars, and the answer is stranger than most people expect. Prettiest and most desired have never meant the same thing, and the galaxy has always known the difference, even when it refused to admit it. The species the galaxy can never stop wanting carried something far stranger than beauty, and the reasons begin with the simplest appeal the galaxy ever produced. The safest version of alien beauty in the galaxy is a woman with blue skin and golden facial markings. That is a Pantoran, and she sits at the foundation of everything the galaxy has ever found attractive in a near-human face. Take a body that looks almost entirely human, keep the proportions exactly where the eye expects them, then shift the skin tone just far enough to signal that this person comes from somewhere else. Pantorans are near-human natives of Pantora, the principal moon orbiting the ice planet Ordo Plutonia. Despite the harshness of their home system, the species reads as warm, polished, and refined. The Clone Wars brought them into view through Senator Rio Chuchi, a diplomat whose golden markings, tied to clan and status across Pantoran culture, made her impossible to miss in a room full of senators. When the Republic nearly provoked open conflict on her own moon, Chuchi walked into a room where weapons had been drawn and spoke until they were lowered, resolving it through composure alone. Nothing about her pushed the species past the comfort zone of the familiar, and that comfort zone is the entire point. The blue skin feels rare rather than strange, inviting rather than foreign. That balance runs through every near-human species the galaxy has ever desired, and a Pantoran is the purest expression of it. But one species in the galaxy earned its beauty rather than being born with it, and every mark on her face proved it. A Marialan woman's face is a living record of identity, and every mark tells a different story. The species' pattern black markings are not decoration. The Clone Wars companion material ties each one to personal achievement or spiritual identity, turning the skin into a map of what she has earned. A Marialan does not need to explain herself, because her face already carries the answer. A Twi'lek is born with her Leku, and a Pantoran is born with her blue skin. But a Marialan earns her beauty one mark at a time, accomplishment by accomplishment. That distinction makes Marialan beauty unlike anything else in the galaxy. Their skin tones run from olive to green-yellow, a shift subtle enough to read as unusual rather than alien, and the pattern tattoos give each face a sense of depth that grows with every mark she carries. Luminara Unduli set the template in Attack of the Clones and the Clone Wars, a Jedi Master who moved through the arena at Geonosis unhurried and precise while the battle raged around her, as though stillness were a weapon in itself. Her Padawan Barriss Offee inherited that presence but eventually took it somewhere far darker, and the Seventh Sister from Rebels channeled those same markings into theatrical Menace. Three characters spanning discipline, tragedy, and danger, all wearing the same markings on entirely different faces. Some species carried their beauty into every corner of the galaxy, but some were vanishing before the galaxy ever had the chance to hold on. The Theelin are one of the rarest species in the galaxy, and every stage they stood on felt like it might be the last. They carry brightly colored hair, spotted skin, and a physical presence that catches the eye in any crowd. Legends material ties their decline to genetic mutations that push the species towards gradual extinction, with pure-blooded Theelin presumed gone by the era of the New Republic. Canon-era characters like Latz Radzi and Gudi Terez carry the Theelin name without any qualifier attached. Theelin women appeared across the galaxy as performers, entertainers, and artists, roles that put their distinctiveness on literal display. The most recognizable among them is Ristal Sant, the half-human, half-Theelin performer seen in Jabba's palace in the special edition of Return of the Jedi. She performed alongside the Max Rebo Band, spotted skin, layered with striking hair, and a performer's confidence that made every moment feel deliberate. In Legends, her backstory runs through captivity under Black Sun and eventual rescue, tying her to the darker side of what the galaxy does with beauty it considers rare. Ristal's beauty was never entirely her own to control, and even her rescue did not undo what captivity had already taken. If Legend sources are right about pure Theelin fading from the galaxy, then every half-Theelin performer was proof that something irreplaceable was slipping away. A Pantoran can be admired on any number of worlds, but a Theelin makes the room feel like it is witnessing something that will not come around again. Beyond rarity though, there are species whose beauty reaches so far past the familiar that it becomes something closer to legend. Deep space pilots carried stories about the Diatham long before anyone could confirm they were real. The Angels of Iago, as they became known, are glowing, winged beings inhabiting the moons of the planet Iago. Their reputation traveled ahead of them across every hyperspace lane, passed from crew to crew, in cockpits and cantinas. Bright figures drifting between the moons, beautiful enough to make a pilot forget the controls. In The Phantom Menace, a young Anakin on Tatooine repeated those spacefarer legends with the certainty of a child who believed every word, calling them the most beautiful beings in the galaxy. The Clone Wars later confirmed their existence in Mystery of a Thousand Moons, putting the species behind the legend briefly into view. Older legend sources go further, describing natural abilities strong enough to overwhelm starship crews and cause vessels to crash on approach to Iago. If those accounts hold any truth, Diatham beauty is not observed, but experienced as a force, one that may override judgment entirely. What followed was a kind of beauty the galaxy rarely knew how to handle, because on Dathomir, power came first. The Night Sisters and their Dathomirian kin occupy a space where attractiveness is rooted in threat. Dathomirian society includes Horned Zabrak males known as Night Brothers and pale-skinned Night Sister women known for powerful witchcraft. The result is a culture where beauty and menace are the same thing entirely, and where the line between attraction and self-preservation is impossible to find. That fusion was armor built over centuries, and anyone foolish enough to test it learned the cost. Night Sisters were never a widely circulated fantasy across the galaxy. Their hold was tied to danger, magic, hierarchy, and revenge. Asajj Ventress is the sharpest proof. Everything about her was deliberate, from the bald head to the predatory way she moved, to a fighting style that felt less like combat and more like a performance of menace. The Clone Wars and Dark Disciple traced her path from Sith apprentice to bounty hunter, a woman who lost her master on Ratatak and was betrayed by Count Dooku, and returned to Dathomir only to watch her sisters burn. She never once softened herself for anyone. She proved that alien beauty can be sharp, fierce, and unapologetic without ever losing its grip, and the galaxy took notice. Mother Talzin, on the other hand, made power itself look like something a person could be drawn to. Her presence carried a weight that had nothing to do with typical attractiveness and everything to do with raw command. The kind of presence that stood taller than anyone in the room through sheer will alone. When Grievous led a full-scale droid offensive against Dathomir, not even that can make the Night Sisters submit. And then came Merrin, introduced in Jedi Fallen Order as a surviving Night Sister carrying the grief of her entire clan. Her bond with Cal Kestis and Jedi Survivor gave the Dathomirian legacy something it never had before: conversations on rooftops, shared grief, and a closeness that made the Night Sister mystery feel personal rather than distant. For the first time, a Dathomirian woman was desired not for danger or power, but for the warmth she chose to share. Ventress is danger, Talzin is power, and Merrin is tenderness, and together, they prove that Dathomirian beauty is the most versatile in the galaxy. And the next species took the opposite approach entirely, guarding its beauty behind a wall of warships so thick, the galaxy could only dream. For centuries, the most beautiful women in the galaxy lived behind a wall of warships, and no one outside could reach them. The Hapes Consortium is a coalition of 63 wealthy worlds ruled by a Queen Mother, tucked inside a cluster of space so dense with stellar hazards and navigational barriers like the transitory mists that reaching it uninvited is nearly impossible. That isolation lasted for generations, and Legends material attributes Hapan beauty to a troubling history of deliberate pairing and political control that produced a population renowned for exceptional physical beauty. Dave Wolverton's novel The Courtship of Princess Leia introduced the Consortium, and the civilization it described was unlike anything else in the galaxy. Hapan beauty was not born of fortunate genetics, but cultivated deliberately, generation after generation, by ruling families that treated physical perfection as a maker of royal worth. The process spanned centuries, and the result was a civilization whose women were considered, by reputation alone, among the most stunning humanoids in the known galaxy. That reputation reached every corner of charted space, without a single Hapan woman stepping outside the consortium to prove it. What separated Hapan desirability from every other species was not appearance, but access. Every other species the galaxy desired was out in the open. A Togruta warrior could be seen on battlefields, and a Night Sister could be encountered if someone was foolish enough to land on Dathomir. Hapan women existed under entirely different terms. Their beauty backed by political power, military strength, and near-total seclusion. Tanel Kajo embodied this across legends, a Hapan Dathomiri princess who eventually became Queen Mother. Her beauty was inseparable from her royalty and her flat refusal to be treated as decoration. She decided when and how her attractiveness was acknowledged, a privilege made possible by the full political and military machinery behind her. Beyond walls and status, there were species whose beauty worked on a level no warship could block, because it changed the chemistry of desire itself. A Falleen woman does not need to be the prettiest in the room if attraction can be chemically reshaped. The Falleen are a reptile-like species with patterned green skin, ridged skulls, and long dark hair, a presence that sits in a colder, more unsettling space than anything the galaxy had produced before. There is an edge of thread built into the way they look, and that edge is the surface of something deeper. Falleen pheromones, natural chemicals their bodies produce, are well established in legends through novels like Shadow of the Empire. The novel Dark Disciple and The Clone Wars both confirm the species' connection to these abilities. The word that appears most consistently across these sources is influence, not enhance, not amplify. The ability is framed as a deliberate tool, something deployed with precision and strategic intent rather than radiating passively outward. The exact scope of this ability in current canon remains unclear, but the reputation is consistent across eras. The most famous Falleen in the galaxy is a man, and that is a problem. Prince Xizor, the Black Sun crime lord from Shadows of the Empire, used Falleen pheromone influence like a weapon, deploying it with the same cold calculation he brought to criminal strategy. His portrayal made the species' abilities unforgettable, turning the Falleen from a background species into one of the most compelling entries in the Legends canon. But Falleen women remain almost invisible in the storytelling. They stand in the background of power, green-skinned, and perfectly still, while the story moves past them. Far from weakening what the Falleen represent, that gap sharpens everything about them. Even in the margins of a scene, a Falleen woman commands attention the way a locked door commands curiosity. The galaxy has only glimpsed what this species can do, and the biology speaks for itself in a language that does not ask for permission. The Falleen proved that desire could be manufactured, but the next species proves something worse, that beauty could turn a civilization into a target. Togruta beauty shone through Jedi heroes and bled through the horrors of the Kyros arc in the Clone Wars. Their head tails, upward growing horns known as montrals, bold facial markings, and brightly colored skin give the species a regal shape unlike anything else in the galaxy. The montrals add height and grandeur that push the species away from softness and towards something closer to warrior royalty. The draw is rooted in the portrayal of grown Togruta women, in Shakti, in the adult Ahsoka of Rebels and the live-action series, and in the unmistakable species presence itself. Shakti embodied that quality completely. A Jedi general throughout the prequel era, she carried herself with a serene presence that made stillness look powerful and combat look effortless. Where other Jedi drew attention through action, Shakti drew it through restraint, and that restraint carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. Ahsoka Tano carried that same appeal in a completely different direction. Her acrobatic lightsaber work, her fierceness, her growth from Padawan into the lead of her own series gave the Togruta species a depth of representation that few other species ever received. Ahsoka is one of the few alien women in the galaxy whose appeal had nothing to do with vulnerability and everything to do with competence, loyalty, and a restlessness that made her impossible to look away from. The adult Ahsoka, the one who walked away from the Jedi Order and came back on her own terms, carried the Togruta legacy further than anyone before her. Between Shaak Ti's quiet gravity and Ahsoka's relentless energy, the species covers an enormous range of what attractiveness can look like. The Togruta shape, those montrals and headtails moving in sync with a body trained for either meditation or combat, creates an impression of physical grace that few other species can match. That grace is what made the Togruta famous across the galaxy. Then the Zygerria arc changed everything the galaxy believed about Togruta beauty. The colony world of Kyros was home to 50,000 Togruta civilians living in peace, and the Zygerian slavers targeted every single one of them. Across the episodes Kidnapped, Slaves of the Republic, and Escape from Kadavo, the series did not soften what the trade in captive people looked like up close. The Togruta faced auction blocks where families were separated, collars locked around warriors and elders alike, forced labor in the processing facilities of Kadavo, and the crushing loss of dignity across an entire population. The Zygerians built their civilization around forced servitude as a cultural tradition, and the episodes never needed to say the Togruta were taken because they were beautiful. The truth ran deeper than appearance alone. A peaceful, visually distinctive colony reduced to product, labor, and leverage by an empire built on captivity. Ahsoka's fury during the Zygerria arc, watching her own people collared and paraded before crowds on auction blocks, is among the most emotionally raw stretches in the entire series. But no species in the galaxy was more consumed for its beauty than the one whose image the galaxy could never stop circulating. No species in the galaxy has been more desired, more put on show, and more thoroughly used for that desirability than the Twi'leks. They are the most iconic answer to the question of which species the galaxy wanted most. Their twin Leku extend from the base of the skull. Their skin tones span every color the galaxy can produce, and their physical grace makes every movement feel deliberate and fluid. Twi'leks sit at the center of everything the galaxy has ever done with alien femininity, a humanoid body carrying one dramatic alien feature that lifts the entire presence into something that feels more than human. The Leku carry far more than visual weight. They are highly sensitive, central to the Twi'lek language, Twi'leki, which blends spoken words with subtle Leku movements to express complete thoughts. Legends material describes them as containing part of the brain itself, which is why they carry the alternate name Braintails. They frame the face, move with the body, and create a sharp, recognizable form across any room. And that instant recognition made the species dangerously easy for the galaxy to buy and sell. Aayla Secura proved that Twi'lek beauty could be a warrior's quality rather than a performer's. Her fluid combat style across Attack of the Clones and the Clone Wars made her one of the most visually striking Jedi in the prequel era, showing that the grace so often associated with Twi'lek women belonged just as naturally on a battlefield as it ever did on a stage. But Twi'lek fame was never built on beauty alone. The image of the beautiful Twi'lek woman became the galaxy's most recognized fantasy, not because of any single quality the species possessed, but because the galaxy's criminal economy, its auction houses, its entertainment districts, and its wealthy elites all worked together to make sure that image was everywhere. The original species lore puts it plainly. That beautiful image doomed generations of young Twi'lek women into servitude, with the wealthy and corrupt using them as badges of prestige. That image filled Hutt palaces, cantinas, wealthy courts, and performance halls across thousands of worlds. Ryloth's harsh conditions fed directly into the system. The Twi'lek home world faced separatist invasion and later imperial occupation, and the vulnerability of its communities gave criminal networks easy access to a population the galaxy already considered desirable. The trade in captive people became one of the darkest recurring threads in Twi'lek history. The galaxy did not just profit from Twi'lek beauty, but took something that belonged to them and hollowed it out. Ula is the clearest image in that system, a young Twi'lek woman taken from the clan lands of Ryloth and held captive in Jabba's palace. She was forced to perform for the Hutt's pleasure. She resisted and was struck down for it, dropped into the Rancor pit beneath the palace floor. Her beauty was literally caged for someone else's enjoyment, and her end proved what refusal cost inside that world. Ula is not an exception. She is the visible surface of a system that the original species lore describes as dooming entire generations. Yet the galaxy also produced the complete opposite of that image. Hera Syndulla is the most fully realized Twi'lek protagonist across Rebels and Ahsoka, a general, a pilot, and a leader who exists in direct opposition to the Ula image. She led a rebel cell, commanded a warship, and raised a family while the galaxy burned around her, earning every bit of respect she carried without ever trading on her species' reputation. She proves that Twi'lek beauty does not have to come at the species' own expense. Her presence does not erase that history, but it insists loudly that the history is not the whole story. The species above them did not just project desire, she absorbed it, and that is a power no beauty alone could ever match. A Zeltron woman does not make a person find her attractive. She makes the entire room feel like attraction is the only reasonable response. On the surface, Zeltrons look just like another attractive near-human species. They carry pink to red skin, a near-human body, and features that read as warm and inviting. If the surface were the full story, Zeltrons would sit somewhere in the middle alongside Pantorans and Mirialans. The surface, however, is the least interesting thing about them. Canon keeps the species alive through characters like Lorica Damaris from the Join the Resistance series, where a Zeltron character describes the effect plainly. They radiate something, a scent or a feeling, that makes people warm to them almost immediately. The deeper Zeltron reputation was built in Legends. Classic Marvel Star Wars comics and later expanded universe stories painted the Zeltron home world of Zeltros as a planet where enjoyment is not a private indulgence but a public value, a civilization oriented entirely around celebration, connection, and emotional openness. On Zeltros, pleasure is not a vice, it is closer to a civic duty, a way of life built on the belief that joy shared is joy multiplied. In practice, a Zeltron's appeal is not one quality, but a layered effect. She looks striking while projecting emotional warmth and genuine intensity, and the people near her feel more relaxed, more open, more inclined to enjoy the moment. Legends sourcebook material like the Essential Guide to Alien Species establishes that Zeltrons produce pheromones and project emotional states outward. On their own, those abilities would place them alongside the Falleen as a species that can influence desire. What separates them is what flows in the other direction. Zeltrons do not just project emotions, they absorb them. They are empathic, meaning they constantly read and feel the emotions of every person around them. She feels your attraction, her warmth responds to it. You feel her warmth and lean in closer, and she feels that too. The cycle tightens with every passing moment, and by the time anyone notices, the entire room is shifted. A Zeltron is not choosing to be charming, she's responding to what she feels in the room, and every smile, every warm glance, every moment of closeness is shaped not by a strategy, but by genuine emotional response to the people around her. The Legends-era Zeltron Dani, who appeared in Marvel's classic Star Wars comics, including the Stenaks Shuffle, showed this in action. She was warm, emotionally transparent, physically affectionate, and openly direct. And every character near her responded with a comfort and closeness that beauty alone could never explain. Being near Dani did not just make people attracted, it made them feel known. The empathic connection comes at a cost. A Zeltron in a crowd does not just feel warmth, she feels everything. The jealousy, the grief, the loneliness, the desire that nobody in the room would ever admit to. Still, Zeltron pheromones carry a weight the galaxy itself has recognized. The people who feel drawn in may not be responding to what they see at all, but to a chemical influence they cannot detect and an empathic connection they never agreed to. The galaxy knows what a Zeltron can do. It warns people away, and almost nobody listens, because listening would mean giving up the best feeling they've ever had. The feeling is real, and so is the influence, and no one who has experienced both has ever been able to tell them apart. She sits above every species because she does not just outshine them, she makes everyone around her forget there was ever a comparison. The galaxy's most desired women were never just beautiful. They were shaped, exploited, weaponized, and biologically armed. And the species that rose to the top did so not by being prettier than the rest, but by changing what attraction itself means in a galaxy that was never kind to the women it wanted most. The Twi'leks sat at the center for a reason, and the full story of why the galaxy never stopped wanting them runs far deeper than the surface of that desire. And then there's Darth Talon, a red-skinned Twi'lek Sith Lord who took everything the galaxy desired about her species and fused it with the dark side itself. She is the one woman in Star Wars where beauty and fear became completely inseparable, and that story comes next.